We all know this already, don't we? The American prison system is broken. We make up about 4% of the world's population, yet we incarcerate roughly 20% of its prisoners. And of the people we release, nearly 70% are rearrested within a period of 5 years. These are not correction numbers. This is a signal of a system stuck in repeat. So here's the question. If we know it's broken, why won't it change? In this video essay, I examine why meaningful prison reform has stopped in the United States despite so much evidence that the current system fails. By analyzing how punitive prison environments shape behavior and also comparing them to rehabilitation-focused models, I argue that ultimately our resistance to reform is driven less by effectiveness but more by fear, specifically the fear of being soft on crime. But ultimately, a justice system should be evaluated by not how harsh it feels, but by how well it's able to prevent future harm. It's around 5 or 6 in the morning. The sun isn't even up yet, but you wake up anyway. Your privacy? Don't even think about it. Whether you're alone, in a cell, or sharing one, it barely matters. Every movement is scheduled. Eat now, shower now, yard now. And then the rest of the day is spent waiting. Endless waiting. You learn the rules quickly. Don't trust too much, don't show weakness, and don't stand out. Cut in line, sit on the wrong bunk, owe the wrong person, talk too much. The consequences come fast. Not always from the guards, but from inside. That's the environment you're faced with every day. And environments shape people. Over time, these conditions begin to change a person. Psychologist Dr. Craig Haney, who's also known to have been one of the key experimenters in the Stanford prison experiment, he researched on the psychological effects of incarceration, and he describes this as prisonization or institutionalization, the survival adaptations that people adapt in order to remain safe within a prison environment. For example, hypervigilance, constantly scanning for threats, or social withdrawal. Because trust becomes so dangerous, people learn to not give it up. And inside prison, these adaptations make a lot of sense. But the moment someone is released, those same adaptations become obstacles to proper reintegration to this free society. So, in essence, prison does not prepare people for life outside. It gears them for prison, and prison only. We know the data. The United States spends roughly $80 to $90 billion each year on prisons and jails. And for context, that's more than many states spend on K-12 education. Black Americans are incarcerated at over 5 times the rate of white Americans for similar offenses. And that 70% rearrest rate, that's not a failure of individual morality, but it's actually a predictable outcome based on the system that we designed. But to be clear, accountability does matter. Harm deserves consequences. But punishment alone has not delivered safety. High recidivism does not protect communities, and in fact, it actually perpetuates harm and creates more victims because we are recycling back crime. We are not stopping crime. So crime rate will only increase and never decrease. In fact, in correctional facilities, like in states like Texas and California, they routinely operate at above capacity. And this drains public resources and drains tax dollars from the public that could have otherwise gone to education or public infrastructure, things that people can actually experience rather than closed institutional systems like prison. And weirdly, in a country that prides itself on second chances, this cruelty embedded in the system feels really out of place. So, what would happen if accountability extended beyond punishment, beyond harsh and cruel living conditions and treatment? What if incarceration addressed the root cause of crime, poverty, trauma, addiction, and mental illness, rather than simply isolating people from society? In fact, we can compare the current US prison system to Norway's system. Take a look at these two rooms. One of them is a dorm at one of the most prestigious universities in the world. The other is a cell in a high-security prison in Norway. If you can't tell which is which, just at a glance, that's by design. Norway's correctional system emphasizes humane living conditions, access to rehabilitative and educational programs, and also mental health care. And what we see as a result is their recidivism rate hovers around 20%, compared to our 70%. And this is not because crime is ignored, but because individuals leave prison better equipped than in America. They are able to solve the underlying causes that lead to their crime, rather just being placed into a harsh environment that doesn't really address any of the root causes. It doesn't solve any issues, it doesn't solve that motive. As a result, we see reoffending rates, we see high recidivism rates in America. But however, the good thing is, America has started, at least in some areas, trying to adopt the same principles that Norway has in their prison system in hopes of reducing this recidivism rate and being able to provide a better environment to these prisoners. For example, Washington State has begun exploring a similar approach known as the Washington Way. These correctional staff in Washington State have traveled to Norway personally to observe their practices so they can reintegrate such principles into America. Norway and the United States, they are not the same. For over 4 decades, Americans' prison criminal justice policy has mainly been focused on a commitment to being tough on crime. That's why proposals that emphasize rehabilitation, they are often dismissed as weak or being soft on crime. This fear has a name, the Willie Horton effect. To understand, let's rewind back into history. In 1988, Michael Dukakis was ahead in the polls, the governor of Massachusetts. He had a reputation as being a problem solver who focused on efficiency, data, and reform. He was calm, competent, and also widely respected. But Dukakis had a vulnerability: crime. Massachusetts then had a program that let prisoners leave for short visits with family or work, and it had a 99.6% success rate. Most people came back. In fact, over 120,000 times without any incident. However, one man didn't. Willie Horton was serving a life sentence for murder, and he committed a violent assault while on one of these weekend visits. That single failure became a national political weapon, and it branded Dukakis as being soft on crime. As a result, Dukakis ended up losing the election. Ultimately, it shows that success doesn't make the headlines, only failure does. That 0.4% ultimately ruined Dukakis' election. And for decades, and even the present, the fear of being the next Willie Horton has kept politicians from trying real reform. And as a result, we see rehabilitation being replaced with longer sentences and more prison. It ultimately goes to show that fear spreads faster than nuance. Punishment itself feels so simple and emotionally satisfying. Rehabilitation is slower, it's more complex, and it's less immediately gratifying. People want to cling to that retributive justice model, that eye for an eye. It's easy to comprehend, it's easy to understand, it's simple, but it doesn't work, and that's the problem. Effectiveness should matter more than appearance. But meaningful reform is not only a matter of policy, it's also a matter of narrative. When incarcerated people are portrayed in news media as insufferable criminals, suffering and imposing a harsh environment on them, it feels justified. But if we acknowledge that individuals are actually shaped by various environmental struggles like poverty, mental health struggles, addiction, that conversation shifts. That angle shifts from seeing them as a cruel, immoral lawbreaker into someone who deserves a second chance. For example, think of a story of maybe a prisoner who learned welding while they were incarcerated. And now they are a parent who mentors other people and helps other people learn how to weld. These stories build empathy. But empathy is quieter than fear, and fear is easier to sell, especially in news mediums, in media, where fear often captures the public's attention more than stories that show empathy. So we remain in this loop. We know the system fails, and we know it costs financially, socially, and morally. And we have evidence of alternatives that work better than this. Yet we continue along the same path. That 5 or 6 a.m. wake up call, it's not just a routine, it's a warning. The question is no longer why the system has not changed. The question is what we are willing to tolerate, what we vote for, and what stories we choose to believe. Change doesn't have to begin in a courtroom or a legislature. It can begin with conversation, with challenging fear using evidence, and with choosing to recognize someone's humanity, even when our intuition guides us not to.